There is a kind of silence that follows a man who has lost command of himself. A silence not filled with anger or open rejection, but with something colder and far more destructive. The quiet fading of respect in the eyes of those around him. And Aristotle warned that this erosion begins not with others but with the weakness a man tolerates within his own soul. Aristotle called this weakness akrasia, the failure of self-mastery, the condition of knowing what is right but lacking the strength to act on it. To him it was not a small flaw but a collapse of virtue, because a man who cannot rule himself will be ruled by his impulses, by the moods of others, and by the fleeting promises of comfort. Weakness in this sense is not just physical fragility or lack of aggression. It is the habit of surrendering principle for approval, of giving up discipline for pleasure, of choosing ease over the harder path of excellence. Women, like men, may not always name this weakness, but they feel it. They recognize when a man bends too quickly, when he fears disapproval more than he fears dishonor, when he hides behind excuses instead of standing firm in decision. Respect is not withdrawn suddenly. It fades in small moments, in the way her eyes wander when he talks, in the way her tone hardens when he asks for reassurance, in the way his presence feels lighter each time he compromises his own word. This is the brutal truth. Respect dies not in conflict but in appeasement. Aristotle's vision of a virtuous man was not someone perfect, but someone consistent. He believed character was built through habituation, the daily training of the soul to align action with principle. When a man fails at this, he does not simply appear weak, he becomes unreliable, and unreliability is the soil in which disrespect grows. People may still use him, they may still accept his gifts or his effort, but they will not honor him. They will not look at him with the gravity reserved for someone who carries weight. Consider a man who constantly apologizes for things that need no apology. At first he seems polite, even considerate, but slowly that habit signals something deeper, that he fears conflict more than he values truth. Over time she begins to test, not out of malice but because weakness invites testing. Each time he folds, the test escalates, and each escalation strips away more respect until all that remains is tolerance at best, contempt at worst. Aristotle would not soften this point. He would say that respect follows strength, because strength is nothing more than the visible form of virtue, and virtue cannot be borrowed, it must be lived. The first step, then, is to stop imagining that approval can replace character. For the man who lacks self-command, no affection will endure, because affection cannot survive where respect has died. When a man begins to wonder why he is not taken seriously, the answer often hides in the simple truth that he has confused affection with respect. And Aristotle would remind us that these are not the same currency. One can be given freely, even cheaply, while the other must be earned through the weight of character. Respect in Aristotle's philosophy rests on aretē, the pursuit of excellence in thought and action. Excellence is not a decoration you wear when convenient. It is a standard that becomes visible in every choice you make. Weak men collapse here because they approach relationships with the logic of trade. If I give comfort, if I provide attention, if I sacrifice enough, then respect will follow. But Aristotle would dismiss this as a false bargain, because respect is not a transaction of favors, it is recognition of virtue. You cannot negotiate for it. You can only embody the qualities that naturally draw it. This is why women, like anyone, will instinctively distance themselves from men who rely on endless reassurance. The more a man pleads to be seen, the less he is actually seen, because attention begged for feels like debt, not admiration. Aristotle believed that the soul seeks what is noble, not what is needy. A man who lives in constant pursuit of validation signals that his center of gravity lies outside himself, and nothing weakens presence faster than that signal. Picture a man at dinner who spends the entire evening trying to anticipate every preference of the woman across from him. The food, the conversation, even his posture is adjusted to avoid disagreement. At first it may look like courtesy, but it soon reveals itself as emptiness, because there is no substance behind the gestures, only the hunger for approval. She may smile, she may thank him, but inside, something essential withers, the belief that he has a spine she can lean against when life becomes heavy. Aristotle framed this difference in terms of prudence, the virtue of practical wisdom. To act with prudence is to know what is right for the situation, and to stand by it, not to endlessly bend to another's shifting moods. Weak men lack this wisdom because they do not trust their own judgment, they outsource it to the person they fear losing. But when a man cannot trust himself, no one else can trust him either, and in that gap, respect evaporates. The brutal truth here is not that women are cruel or demanding, but that respect cannot survive where a man refuses to live by principle. Approval may linger, comfort may be exchanged, even intimacy may continue, but the core recognition that he is a man of weight, a man who carries himself with dignity, dies the moment he makes weakness his habit. The illusion most men cling to is that respect can be secured in dramatic moments, through a single act of charm, a burst of confidence, or a sudden display of generosity. But Aristotle taught the opposite, that character is revealed not in flashes but in patterns, and the man who fails to build strength as a habit will always watch his influence decay. For Aristotle, virtue was inseparable from habituation. A man becomes courageous by practicing courage, temperate by practicing moderation, just by practicing fairness. It is never enough to claim the title once. It must be lived until it becomes second nature. Weak men collapse here because they imagine strength as something they can summon when tested, while living the rest of their lives in compromise. But respect, especially from women, is not given for potential or for occasional displays. It is given when strength is steady, when discipline is consistent, when the evidence of principle shows in the rhythm of daily life. This is why inconsistency breeds contempt. A man who speaks about discipline, yet cannot control his temper, who preaches ambition yet spends his nights in distraction, who promises leadership yet avoids decisions, soon finds that his words ring hollow. Aristotle would say such a man is enslaved by vice, because vice too is a habit, built by repetition, etched into the soul through every small surrender. The tragedy is that while he may fool strangers with a sudden gesture of resolve, those closest to him, including women, will always see the truth in the long run. The habit of weakness outweighs the moment of strength. Think of the man who claims he will change. He buys the gym membership, he reads the book, he sets the alarm for dawn, but by the second week the routine collapses, excuses return, and the promise fades. To Aristotle, this is not just laziness, it is a defect of the soul, because the inability to maintain discipline is itself a moral failing. Respect cannot root itself in such soil, because there is nothing solid for it to cling to. Women, like all people, may forgive failure, but they cannot respect inconsistency. Respect is nourished by reliability, by the quiet confidence that a man will do today what he said he would do yesterday. It does not demand perfection, but it does demand stability, and stability is the fruit of practiced strength. Aristotle's brutal truth is that weakness is not a moment of collapse but a life trained in collapse. If a man wishes to be respected, he must not look for one great act to redeem him, but for 1,000 small acts to rebuild him. For in the eyes of others, and especially in the eyes of women, it is the habit of strength, not the flash of it, that marks him as worthy of respect. There is a certain presence that cannot be faked, a presence that makes others fall silent when a man enters a room, not because he is loud or aggressive, but because he carries himself as though his worth does not need explanation, and Aristotle named this rare quality megalopsychos, the greatness of soul. The great-souled man in Aristotle's account is neither boastful nor self-effacing. He does not beg for recognition, nor does he shrink from it when it comes. He accepts honor as something natural, not because he demands it, but because he lives in such a way that it follows him. Weak men stand in stark contrast. They overstate their value, inflating small gestures into proof of importance, or they bury themselves in false humility, hoping others will reward their sacrifice with respect. In both cases, the result is the same. The respect they long for slips further away. What Aristotle saw clearly is that dignity flows from proportion. A man must neither think too highly of himself without grounds, nor too little of himself when he has reason for confidence. Women, like everyone else, notice when a man is out of proportion. If he brags about victories that do not exist, his image shrinks. If he denies his own strengths in the name of appearing modest, he looks unsteady. But when he stands calmly in truth, without exaggeration or apology, respect naturally rises around him. Consider the difference between two men at work. One constantly reminds others of his contribution, chasing acknowledgement like a beggar chasing coins. The other speaks rarely of himself, but his consistency, his composure under pressure, and his refusal to be swayed by gossip make his presence unmistakable. Over time, people gather around the second man, not because he demanded attention, but because he embodied weight. In relationships, the pattern is the same. The man who insists on being respected loses it, while the man who quietly lives as if respect is the only fitting response commands it without words. Aristotle would argue that the weakness of modern men lies not only in failing to act, but in failing to carry themselves with proportionate pride. They mistake meekness for virtue, when true virtue is measured confidence, the kind that comes from alignment between action and principle. The brutal truth is that women do not despise weakness because they are cruel. They recoil from it because it contradicts the natural attraction to strength of soul. To live as the great-souled man is to free oneself from the hunger for constant approval. It is to know your worth, and to live it, not with arrogance, not with apology, but with the steady calm of someone who cannot be bought and cannot be bent. This, for Aristotle, is the mark of a man truly worthy of respect, and without it, every attempt at winning admiration collapses into performance. The downfall of many men is not a dramatic collapse, but a slow surrender to comfort. And Aristotle warned that nothing weakens respect more than a life ruled by pleasure instead of principle. In his Ethics, Aristotle placed great weight on temperance, the discipline of desire. He argued that pleasure itself is not evil, but that the man who makes it his compass will drift into ruin. Weak men often fail here because they confuse indulgence with freedom. They believe that doing what they want whenever they want is proof of strength, when in truth it is evidence of slavery to appetite. And women, whether consciously or not, sense this captivity. They know when a man is mastered by distraction, whether it is drink, idleness, entertainment, or the endless search for validation, and they cannot respect someone who does not rule himself. Respect requires contrast. A man who is always available, always eager, always ready to entertain carries no gravity. Aristotle understood that desire must be shaped, restrained, and aimed toward higher ends, toward work, purpose, and virtue. Without this shaping, desire consumes itself, and the man consumed by it appears light, fragile, and unfit to carry responsibility. Think of the man who cancels his plans, abandons his discipline, or betrays his own word simply to satisfy a passing craving. To him it feels like freedom. To those watching, it looks like weakness. She may enjoy the momentary benefit of his indulgence, but in her eyes he shrinks. Because reliability dies, the instant pleasure becomes his master. Aristotle's brutal truth is that indulgence is never neutral. It either sharpens a man when kept in proportion, or it corrodes him when it takes control. This is why he placed the highest respect not on the man who avoids all pleasure, but on the man who governs it. Self-denial alone does not command respect, nor does reckless indulgence. What commands respect is balance, the ability to enjoy without being owned, to engage without losing direction, to choose desire when appropriate, but refuse it when it endangers purpose. Weak men fail here because they lack the inner order to say no, and without that order they appear unstable. For Aristotle, the path was clear: The temperate man is strong because his pleasures never outrun his reason. He is trustworthy because he does not betray himself in pursuit of comfort. He is respected because he is not swayed by every appetite or distraction. And in relationships, this steadiness becomes decisive. The woman who sees that a man cannot be owned by indulgence sees at the same time that he is a man who can be relied upon. The most brutal truth Aristotle leaves us with is also the simplest. Respect is never given to a man because he asks for it. It is granted only when his life demands it. Weak men fall into the trap of chasing recognition, believing that if they plead enough, serve enough, or wait long enough, others will finally honor them. But Aristotle would say this is a misunderstanding of human nature. Respect is not charity. It is a response to strength of character, and where that strength is missing, contempt quietly takes its place. Aristotle taught that every man has a telos, an end toward which his life should aim. For the virtuous man, this end is not comfort, not constant affection, not safety. It is the flourishing that comes when his actions align with principle. Weak men ignore this end, and instead live in reaction to others, bending their choices around moods and demands. They hope that by yielding they will be loved. But Aristotle's philosophy shows why this hope is misplaced. Love without respect is fragile, and the man who lives without virtue can never hold either for long. The practical reality is that respect follows purpose. A man who knows where he is going and why he is going there cannot be ignored. He may be opposed, resisted, or even envied, but he will be respected because his life has weight. A man without purpose, by contrast, becomes a shadow. His presence is tolerated but never honored, because shadows cannot lead. And in relationships, this difference becomes decisive. A woman may smile at a shadow, she may even indulge it for a season, but she cannot anchor her respect to it. Respect attaches only to substance. Aristotle's vision of manhood was demanding. He did not allow for excuses because he saw that excuses rot the soul. If a man fails to lead himself, he cannot lead others. If he fails to speak truth, his words lose value. If he fails to set standards, his relationships collapse into chaos. Weak men want to believe they can bypass these requirements, that affection or loyalty can be earned by constant giving. But the truth is harsher. Respect is earned only by living as a man of principle, and principle cannot be imitated. It must be real. This is why Aristotle's brutal truth still strikes today. It strips away illusions and forces the hardest choice. Either build yourself into someone who can be respected, or accept that disrespect is not an accident, but the consequence of weakness. In the end, there is no softer answer. Respect is the shadow of strength, and without strength, there is nothing left to cast it.